I shared some of my experiences on my paranormal experience, episode 102. So now I'm back to share some more of my experiences. My name is Donna Hough, and just last week I was on Dogman Encounters Radio live, and on that particular episode, it was part 2 of The Werewolf Behind You. I shared a story about when I had actually had a demon possession, and I wanted to specify something about that at that time that happened when I messed with the Ouija board and that terrible thing happened to me. At that time, I had not yet had any kind of relationship or any kind of experience with God. I was not a Christian. I was doing things and messing with things in the paranormal that I shouldn't have been doing at that time, that opened the door. But after that, in fact, that was one of the things that actually led me to God and to led me to Christ, was the fact that when that was happening, that my only salvation, my only rescue from that horrible situation was when the Virgin Mary opened her eyes and smiled at me and then closed her eyes. And then the thing was released out of me, and then I was filled with a peace that passes all understanding. And that was my first real experience with the fact that the Virgin Mary does play an integral part in the whole God thing, and that Jesus is very real, and that there's just something more to that. And that led me to where that's the reason why now I know that I'm saying all this just because I want to reiterate that I know that that particular ugly entity will never bother me again. It will never come back. I'll never ever, that's so far gone, and that's never going to happen, because at that time I didn't have Jesus, and now I do. So they are terrified of Jesus. They're terrified of, they are literally terrified of him. Anyway, so that being said, I was going to say that the light and the dark can't dwell in. Like when you got a light and you got a room and it's all lit up, there's no darkness. I mean, there might be some shadows around, but when you light them up, there's no darkness. So darkness cannot come in where the light exists. One of the things I was going to talk about tonight was some of my UFO experiences that I didn't talk about last time. There's a YouTube place called Wild and Weird West Virginia. That was the very first place that I ever confessed anything publicly. And this is a story that I let them tell. I didn't tell it. They told it for me because I had written it into them. But it's called Wild and Weird West Virginia on Thursday nights. But anyway, I had written in this to them that this was something that happened to myself with Paul and to both of my brothers. We were still living here in Arizona at the time, and both of my brothers lived in Salt Lake City at the time. And this was a shared experience that this particular Halloween, I had a friend who was moving back to Kentucky, and we had gone over there to visit them. They lived over by Bullhead City, and we went over there to visit them and and we had a dinner that we were going to go to that night. There was a dinner and a meeting that was in a small town called Riviera that was right on the Colorado River. And anyway, so what happened was we went over there and time just lagged. This particular day, time was not moving. I mean, you could look at the clock and it would say like 5 minutes to noon, and then go do a bunch of things, come back and look at the clock, and only like 4 minutes had passed, when you know that you couldn't have possibly accomplished all that in just 4 minutes. So something was wrong with time. And I kept asking her, is there something wrong with your clocks? And she'd go, no. And her and her husband didn't seem to notice anything, but Paul and I were very aware that something was going on with the time. And so then when we left and said our goodbyes, and then we went to dinner, and we got there at 4:30, a half hour ahead of time. And we found our place at the table, and we sat down, and we were waiting and kind of talked a little bit to a couple of people. And then next thing you know, the meeting was starting. It was 7:00, and we're like, looking at each other, and we were pretty hungry. And we're like, what about dinner? And the gal who was leading the meeting said, we're done with dinner. We had dinner. And we're looking at each other like, what? That's impossible. We got here in plenty of time. And we saw them working and doing stuff, getting things ready. So we knew that dinner was going to be any time, and yet we totally missed it. So there was from 4:30 to 7:00, that's 2.5 hours that we can't account for. But we were hungry, so we figured, well, we're just going to have to go. So we didn't stay for the meeting. We went over and had something at a restaurant, and then we headed home. We started going out, and on the side of the highway, there's in this one area, there's a huge sign, one of those that lights up, and it has stuff on it. Shows you the temperature and the time and all these other things. And we noted the time when we had left this truck stop restaurant. We noted the time. So we know that it wasn't like we didn't leave the restaurant until 1 a.m. I mean, we saw right there on the big lights on the marquee thing where it said that it was a little after 11. And we were like, okay, so we came straight home from there. Didn't stop anywhere. Just stayed on the highway, and then we got out. And then when we got to where we have to turn off the pavement to go down the dirt road that comes around to our place, I noticed off in the north a huge bright orange orb light. And it was so brilliant. I was like, Paul, look at that. And he looked and he said, huh. And we're looking at it, and he drove real slow down that road. We're looking at it going, what is that? We come around the bend, park in front of our gate, and we sat there for a minute looking at it going, what is that? And we're trying to figure out what it was, because it's so intense and bright. And Paul said it looked like it was something that was over by the New England mine. And I'm like, yeah, it does look. But anyway, so then he looks at his phone and he cussed and said, something was wrong with his phone now because the time was off. And I looked and it said it was 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I looked at my phone and I'm like, no, my phone's doing the same thing. So it must be an issue with Sprint. So we come on in, and all the clocks inside said the same thing. They were even the alarm clock sitting by the bed, the clock in the kitchen, everywhere. All the clocks said the same thing as the phones. So we had somehow or other, it had taken us all that time, almost 2 hours, to get from that part of the freeway home and in. And we're like, we didn't sit out there and look at that light for 2 hours. I mean, come on, this is just what's going on. So then I realized I was supposed to call my brother. And it's an hour later there in Utah than it was when I thought, well, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, but I'm just call and leave a message, right? Well, he winds up answering. And I told him, I'm so sorry that I didn't call you when I was supposed to, but weird things are going on today. And I told him about it, and he said, wait a minute, just stop. I want you to just say that again, but wait, let me put it on speakerphone. So he calls my brother, and Mike comes in. And he says to me, now I want you to tell me what you just told me again so Mike can hear you. So I did, and Mike is like, oh my God, the exact same thing happened to them that happened to us. Word by word. I mean, and they had almost 2 hours of time where they were getting ready to expect trick-or-treaters, because they're right in Salt Lake City, right? So they're going to have trick-or-treaters come to the door. They pop a movie in and sit down to watch the movie, and he went into the kitchen to grab something, comes back in, and the movie's over. It's just ending. So it's all that time went by, and they were not aware of sitting there watching that movie. So they were like, what happened? What happened? What happened to so they were sitting there talking about what the heck happened to the time. At the same time, Paul and I were over here in Arizona wondering what happened to the time. So all four of us had a shared experience of almost 2 hours of missing time at the same time on that same night. Not to mention the anomaly of the time throughout the day where it would seem to lag and didn't make sense. And the orange orb, whether that had anything to do with it, I don't know, but it was part of that evening. And the next day, Paul and I actually drove out the Highway 1 to see how long it would take us to get there. It took 14 minutes to get from our driveway to where that marquee was and back. So we're like, yeah, it didn't take no 2 hours to get home. But these disappearances became a common thing in my life. Also, there was this time when I was living in Arroyo Grande in California on Elm Street, and I disappeared, and I don't know where I was. I have no memory of any of it. It was to this day, it still troubles me, and I wonder, where was I? It was on a Friday night. I was divorced at the time, and my kids were going to their dad's house for the weekend. So here Friday night, he got the kids, and I come home, and I thought, I'm going to lay down and take a nap on the couch, because I had a friend who worked at a 24-hour store, convenience store. Her name was Peggy, and it was her night to work, and I had told her, since I don't have the kids that night, I can come down here and visit you and keep you company for part of your shift. So it's like, fine, So I went ahead and took a nap, laid down just after 5, and I woke up after 11. And I thought, oh gosh, her shift started at 10. So I'm kind of late to go visit her. So I said, okay, it's kind of late to visit her, but I'll go. So I pull in there, right? And she comes walking out the store kind of huffy. And she cussed and she goes, where in that? Where have you been, lady? And she was just like, she was upset with me. And I was like, Peggy, lady, chill, chill. I'm not that late. Gosh, you don't have to make a big deal out of it. I'm sorry. I took a nap and I slept later than I thought I would. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm sorry I'm late. And she just kind of looked at me oddly, like she realized something wasn't right. And she said, do you know what day it is? And I'm like, yeah, it's Friday. And then she just said, try Sunday. And I'm like, Sunday? What? No, this is Friday. She's like, no, it's Sunday. And I'm like, what the heck? I didn't believe her. I thought there's something wrong with her. But it turned out, yeah, it was Sunday. And I had been missing. I never showed up Friday night to visit her. And first thing Saturday morning, she started, she came to my apartment, banging on the door, trying to raise me. My car was parked right there, but I wasn't answering the door. She was really worried. She got a hold of my brother, and they came over, and actually, because I lived upstairs, they climbed up onto my balcony, and the sliding glass door was not locked, so they just came in, and I was nowhere in the apartment. My purse and my car keys were right there in the kitchen, and my car was parked there, but I wasn't there. And they went around looking for me in the complex, knocking on the doors. Is Donna here? Is Donna visiting you guys? And they walked around. They couldn't find me. They drove around. Every so often, they'd come back to the apartment and look for me, or they'd call, and I'd never answer the phone. Back then, in those days, though, I think you had to, when you called the police, you had to wait. Maybe not for little kids, but for an adult missing, I think you had to wait 24 or 48 hours. There was a time period before they would officially say you were missing. And so they were waiting, and then all of a sudden I just showed up at the store on Sunday night out of the blue, and nobody knows where I was, and I don't know where I was. I have no memory of that, no memory of any of it. As far as I'm concerned, I laid down at 5 p.m. or around that time on Friday night, took a nap, woke up just after 11. That's what it is to me, but evidently I was gone. And so those missing times, I've had other ones in my life, but never for that long, never for days, where, what are you going to do? Not get up and get a drink of water? But I wasn't even there when people went in to look for me. So where was I? And people have said, well, maybe you should get hypnotized, but I've thought about that. But then I thought, what if I've been told, and I don't know if this is true because I don't know nothing about it, but I've been told that when you get hypnotized, once they bring you to remember, to know that you never do forget it again. And I thought, what if it was something so awful that I don't want to remember it and I'll be stuck with that memory? Maybe I don't want to know, but I do want to know, but maybe I shouldn't know. Maybe some things are better left forgotten. I don't know, but so there's been other times where I disappeared, where Paul and I disappeared, where my brothers disappeared. So I have no idea what that's about. But I did have a friend who's since passed away. Her son-in-law is the one who saw the dog man back when he was a Boy Scout at camp, back when he was at camp. That was her son-in-law. But anyway, this same sweet lady had asked me one time, because she was a person that I could actually talk to about some of these things. And, she asked me one day why I never wanted to talk about UFOs. You talk about Bigfoot and you talk about ghosts and everything under the sun, but you want to talk about UFOs. Why? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess because I think it's probably just military. I don't think it means anything. I've seen UFOs, but I just always thought it was some kind of military thing and never really looked beyond that. I was too interested in other paranormal things. And so she told me that a lot of my experiences that I'd talked with her about seemed kind of interesting to her. And so she offered me a book to borrow, and it was called the Communion Letters. Not communion, but the Communion Letters. But it was by Whitney Strieber. Anyway, I looked at the cover of that book and I remembered that type of cover that I'd seen years before that, like back sometime in the 80s, when I went into a grocery store and the book stand there it was, and it caught my eye, and I was drawn to it, but then I was also repulsed by it and repelled from it. And then I kept having to go back to it, though, because I was intrigued, and it meant something. It just meant something, but I didn't know what it meant. I was like, what does that mean? It means something, but yet I want to get away from it. And I go to the vegetable department and I go back to the book stand and go over to another department and throw some stuff in my cart and go back to the book stand. And then finally I was like, I'm just going to leave this store. And as I was checking out, the guy behind me at the checkout center, it's like I knew him or something. He was standing there behind me and he was smiling. It was a friendly, nice smile, but it was like we know each other, but he was a stranger, and he was kind of tall. But one of the weirdest things about him was that I'm pretty sure he was human, but he almost didn't look human because he was too pristine. I mean, his skin was like porcelain. I mean, it was like he was so pure and so nobody ever looked that handsome or that pure. It was like Barbie and Ken, like a Ken doll or something. It was like, who is this person? But yet I felt like we had a deep, strong connection, not romantically or anything, but like we knew each other, like some kind of connection that I couldn't really describe, but I knew that we were connected somehow, and that he was smiling at me because we knew each other and that we had a connection, but I didn't know what it was because I didn't know him. Never seen him before, and I knew I never seen him before. So I just kind of, went off. When I left, he said, goodbye, Donna. Like, I'm like, oh, okay. He knows my name. I'm like, yeah, bye, whoever you are. But I was like out of there. So anyway, here I am, fast forwarding decades later in the early 2000s, and I'm talking with Connie, and she hands me this book, and I'm remembering all of a sudden, I remember that day. I remember that book that I saw in the grocery store that day that I couldn't buy, and I couldn't take it, and I couldn't leave it. And it bothered me for a long time. And now I'm looking at that Connie's handing me this book, so I borrowed the book and I started reading through it. And it's just letters that people wrote to Whitley Strieber about their experiences seeing UFOs and different weird things. And some of it resonated very much with me because, like, people talking, especially in Southern California back in the 50s and 60s, where they had imaginary friends that would come to them and visit them. And I had one that had a strange name that my mom says she wishes she'd written it down. And my friend used to come in the night, and I was never afraid of him. I thought that there was a cartoon character way back from the 50s called Crusader Rabbit. There was Crusader Rabbit and his sidekick, Rags the Tiger. And that was like who I thought that was. I thought Crusader Rabbit was coming to visit me at night because that's what it looked like to me. Big ears, big eyes. And so I thought, Crusader Rabbit. And that's what I told my mom. There was a rabbit. And, but his name wasn't Crusader Rabbit. It was some other name that my mom was like, it was a really long name and like 5 syllables or something. And anyway, but I told my mom a whole lot of things that I should not have been able to know at that age. Like I was about 6 years old when Kennedy got shot, when he was assassinated. And I told her before that morning, I told her about the president getting killed. And she was like, don't be ridiculous. But I didn't really even know what a president was. I didn't have it in my mind. That she just told me a president was a very important man. And then I told her when my friend told me that the president's going to get killed. And my mother was like, don't be ridiculous. That was her first thing. That was her first response. And then he did. But I remember that morning, everybody going out. I remember everybody was all the housewives, because back then wives were staying home, taking care of the kids in the house, and the husbands worked. It was a different world. But anyway, I remember all the women in the neighborhood came out. They were all standing in the street. They were crying and they were holding each other like they were all in disbelief. And it was a really horrible time. And I could see everybody's aura, but only I didn't know at that time it was an aura that I was seeing. But I saw everybody's color change to a kind of a dull gray. And it was like, I thought everybody could see the colors. That it wasn't for years later that I found out that that's called an aura and that not everybody sees that. And it was actually a pastor who told me that. When I was talking to this pastor one time about it, and I was explaining something to him, and I said, you know how when you can see the outline of a person, like when you're standing there and you're looking at him, and he's looking at me like I'm nuts, and I'm like, you know what I'm talking about, the line? Like if you're drawing a line around them, they're, like that silhouette thing that goes, and he's looking at me, and then he says, you mean, are you talking about aura? And I'm like, well, I guess that the line thing that goes around them, like sometimes it's yellow, like on red, and then and he's looking at me like, he said, you must be gifted because not everybody can see that, Donna. And I'm like, all these years I thought everybody saw everybody like I do. I thought everybody saw the world like me, but I guess they don't. But anyway, the thing about that was a weird thing because I had actually had an out-of-body near-death experience. Again, here we go with another weird one because but this was a good one. Well, it was not good, but it was good. How can I say that right? Because I got shot. That was the bad part. The bad part was I got shot in the chest with a .38 caliber at point blank. So it was a pretty threatening situation, but it was all an accident, But I was outside of my body. I was watching everything. And I was trying to tell everybody, I'm okay. But I saw everything from out of my body was laying there in a pool of blood. And I saw everything, like even outside, inside the building and outside. because it was in a 7-Eleven store. And I saw my brother run out of the store, and he ran out into the middle of the street where the intersection was, and he was banging on his car, screaming, "Help, help, my sister's been shot. My sister's got shot." And they just left the car there and came running in with my brother. And the guy who shot me had already called for the fire department, because back then they didn't have 911. Well, at least we didn't use it. If they did, we didn't know about it. Anyway, we were always told to call the fire department first. Anyway, so they were already on their way. And my brother told me later, yes, he did go out there. He did run outside there and into the traffic at the intersection. But I saw it. How could I see it unless I was on the outside of my body? But everything was like a panoramic view where I saw everything up, down, to both sides, across, indoors, outdoors. Everything was open to my vision. And I was just trying to calm everybody down and tell everybody that I was okay. And when the police came in there was a friend of the family. His name was Jerry Thompson. And he was just a teenager at the time. And he came walking in, and he kind of fell on his knees, and he was like, "Oh my God, it's Donna." And one of the officers said, "You know her?" And he said, "Yes." And he kind of helped Jerry outside and was outside talking to him. And I saw all of it. I saw everything. And then when I got in the ambulance, when they put me in the ambulance, everything started getting really small once I was in the ambulance. Kind of like Google Earth. They didn't have internet then, but now, you can look at some place on Google Earth and the Google Earth satellite, and then you can go further and further out until finally you're just looking at a little picture of the Earth. It was like that. It's like everything got smaller and smaller. Like I was looking at the top of the ambulance going down the road, and it got smaller and smaller, and like I was just going further and further away from it. And when I came back, it was like I fell. I was in the emergency room, and I fell into my body. I felt like thug. I weighed about, I don't know, maybe 115 pounds, but I felt like I weighed a ton, just boom, just falling back in my body. And there was a light, a shining, bright light, and I'm trying to adjust to it. And I opened my eyes, I realized it was a light that was above the hospital bed. And the doctor leaned over me and said, "Welcome back, Donna." And I was like, huh. So it was like a total out-of-body experience, like near-death experience. And I remember talking to God like I was making a bargain, like I didn't want to go yet. But I don't remember it as a conversation between God and I. It was more like I was just saying, "Please let me live," that kind of thing. "And please let me come back, and I'll do whatever you want me to do." It was a bargaining thing. Anyway, but I came back. And so I've heard people who have had something like that happen to them wind up in their life with other things happening to them. And maybe that's true. I don't know, but that did happen. And I was just thinking, it just hit me, other thing that happened that was way, way later in life. That was in 1989. I had a stillborn birth, and I was really, really, really deeply, deeply wounded over it. But this moment that I was mourning and grieving, and I was like having a real hard time. And at that time, I had a collection of music boxes that sat up on a shelf pretty high up. And there was one particular music box that I got for Christmas one year that was shaped like a little church, and it had a little church bell in it that went back and forth. And the difference between that the reason I'm mentioning this one, the difference between that music box and all the other ones is because you wind them up. But this specific music box, you didn't wind it up. You had to turn it on and off. It had a switch that was on, off on the side of it. So you couldn't just, you couldn't just wind it up. But anyway, so I was sitting there this one particular afternoon, and I was kind of in a catatonic state of grieving, and all of a sudden, the silence was broken. I was alone at the time, and the silence was broken. But this loud, piercing, sounded louder than, it was loud. And I'm like, what's that noise? What's that noise? And I'm going, what is that? What is that? Where's that coming from? And it turned out, I looked up, and it was that music box, and it was playing. It played Amazing Grace. And the little bell was going back and forth playing Amazing Grace. And I looked like I was, what? And then it was like I was sitting there, and it stopped, and everything was silent. Then all of a sudden, here comes this voice, and I know people would say he's schizophrenic, but no, this was a voice, and it said, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Because, see, in my mind, I was like moving, I was going around the morgue. It's like they had taken the baby. I got to hold him, but they had taken the baby to the morgue. They had to find out cause of death and all that. So they took the baby, and that's where I was. I was wandering around in my mind. It was like my mind was out of, like I wasn't really there. I was at the morgue searching for my poor baby, and a grieving mother. And then all of a sudden, this music box starts playing, and then it stops, and then this voice says, why are you looking for the living among the dead? And I was like, wow, that just blew my mind. And then I got a chair, and I climbed up there, and I got the box, and I look at this box, and it was turned off. It wasn't even turned on. And I knew a miracle just happened. I knew it was a miracle. And so I put that box back up on the shelf, and to this day, I got rid of all my boxes when I moved to Arizona, but I kept that one because that one's special, as you can well believe. It's a very special little music box to me. It has a deep meaning. So, and there was that, just that. That's why I say, some things are sad, but then they have something beautiful. Like, yes, I got shot, but then I had this total out of body experience, and yes, I lost a child, but then I had this beautiful experience with God, and the miracle of the music box letting me know that, that he wasn't dead, that, and just, and like when Paul died, it was so bizarre because, I don't know if ever saw the movie. I always try to make a comparison so people can get a picture in their mind. Back sometime in the mid-'80s, there was a movie called Lady Hawk with Michelle Pfeiffer. And there's this little clip in that movie where, see, he's a wolf by night and a man by day, and she's a hawk by day and a woman by night. So they like have this curse on them, and they can never be together as man and wife. They've always, it's either she either wanders at night with her wolf, and he wanders around by day with his hawk. But this part in the movie where the sun is beginning to rise, and so she's a woman, and she's laying there next to her wolf, and he's changing into man, and she's getting ready to go into hawk. But for that one split moment in time, they get to see each other, and they're just looking at each other in shock, like this. And it's a really beautiful moment in the movie. But the reason I talk about that is because that's what happened to me. That it was a few months after Paul died, and I know I've talked to other people who saw their mate or a loved one after they died, their mother or somebody. Well, this particular night, it was, I was asleep, and I woke up in the middle of the night around 3 a.m, and I rolled over, opened my eyes, and there was Paul sitting there watching me, just watching me sleep. And I was kind of like that in the movie Lady Hawk. I was like shocked, looking at him like he was just there, just as plain as day. There he was, sitting there watching me sleep. And then he got a look on his face, and his eyes got big, like she can see me. Like I was surprised that I could see him, and he was surprised that I could see him. Like we could see each other for that one, and it didn't last any longer than just a small space of a second of, where we both looked at each other and saw each other and looked shocked at each other, like, and then then I couldn't see him anymore. I won't say he was gone because I don't think he went anywhere. I just think I was not able to see him anymore. And I really treasure that moment. So, some strange things happen in our lives, But, so like I said, I had my childhood friend that came and saw me every night. And, the funny thing is that house, I went back years later, I don't know, about maybe 10 years ago. Paul and I went by that neighborhood, and we went and that house, it's funny that I needed help getting out. I must have been really little because that bedroom window wasn't that high up of the ground. So for my friend to come and have to help me to get out of the window, and he also helped to teach me how to go up and down a ladder. He taught me how to draw. He taught me all kinds of things, and told me all kinds of things. And my mother was very much brought up religiously that this was just like everything that was not everything that you can explain had to be from hell, had to be a demon. So she was afraid, and she must have taken me a doctor or something, because I remember her telling me that the doctor told her that I just had a very vivid imagination, which I think that was kind of like the pat answer, A lot of kids have these things, and doctors don't want to say, "Oh yeah, your child sees ghosts, or your child, sees angels, or whatever." So they just say your child has a very vivid imagination. They just throw that out there because they don't want to admit that it could be anything else. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of other experiences. I don't know. You probably don't have a lot of time for me to go on, but just as I think of them. Oh, this fizzle stick thing. Oh yeah, there was and I wonder if that's where where the old legends of magic wands. I wonder about that, because, one time, because I've had things walk in, and you can feel them and sense them when somebody's walking towards you, they're coming, and you think, oh, who's here? And that's happened to me so many times where it was not an actual human. It was like just an entity, but never anybody mean or bad. But this one particular time when something was coming towards me, and I was laying, this time I was wide awake, but I was laying with my face towards a wall, and Paul was not there, and he hadn't come home yet. It was still, but I already went to bed. But I was laying there, and all of a sudden, I felt him coming up behind me, but I wasn't afraid of it because, it happened so much. But this particular time was weird and unique because they touched me on my forehead with something, and it sparked sparks, and I saw the sparks flying. It's like I felt this thing tap me on the forehead, and then I see sparks. When you're in like the 4th of July and you have those sticks called, they're like sparklers, and you just hold the stick and they light the end of the stick and they just shoot sparkles all over the place. It was just like that. It's like whoever it was touched me on my forehead with this stick of some sort, and then it sparked all over the place. All these sparkles went flying, and I'm watching them all shoot around. And then then it stopped, and it felt kind of like a buzzing electricity thing, like zzz, spark, spark, spark. And then it was over. And I thought, but I didn't turn around. I just said, okay. And then that was it. And I never turned around to see who did it. I didn't, I just figured, okay. We just got touched by a sparkler. All right. this is okay. And then the next thing I knew, I fell asleep. And the next morning I told Paul all about it. I said, oh, Paul, before you got home last night, blah, 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 blah. And, but I still don't know what it was about. Why? I mean, was it a healing? Was it, I don't know. I can't say. I don't have any idea. I just know it happened. So yeah, these different things that happen in your life and you never know why. Maybe you'll never know. Maybe you will someday know. Maybe you won't know, but it is what it is. So anyway, I'm finally coming out and telling everybody this, just making it public, because the first time was here a couple months ago, back the very first time a friend of mine told me about that Wild and Weird, West Virginia. So I sent a thing to them, an email thing to them about that one experience with the orange orb and the strange time anomalies. And that was my first time. They asked me, can we read that over the radio? And I said, sure. And that was my first time ever going public with anything that happened to me. And now I've gone public on Dogman Encounters Radio and on my paranormal experience. So I'm getting stuff out, and it's therapeutic for me because I've only had a couple of friends in my life that I ever could really talk to things about. And the thing in my knee, just want to throw that out there, that thing in my knee that popped up, and they removed it, but they never knew what it was, and it was radioactive. That's another weird thing. Yeah, I forgot about the thing in my knee. I've had it my whole life. And the doctor, I went to one doctor, he did the ultrasound, whatever you call it, the MRI. And he said, oh yeah, there was some kind of little boxy cube thing in there, and my body rejected it and built a massive ball of calcium around it, rejecting it. And he said, these usually last a year or two, and then they phase out, and then we'll remove it. And I'm thinking, but I had this since ever I could remember. And there's a scar on each knee, on the exact same place on both knees. And he said, well, that's probably how the foreign object got in there, but we don't know what it is, but we'll take it out. And then 6 months later, he had me go in for a bone scan to see how it was doing. And the radiologist said it was really radioactive. He says, wow, this thing's really radioactive. That's really odd. And I'm like, well, I'm not surprised that there's something odd about me. Sorry. But anyway, so then that doctor moved or something. And so I had to get another one. And that doctor wound up removing it. And I asked him, can I see what was inside that calcium ball? Can I have it? And he's like, no. Like he was grossed out and like mortified that I asked. But I'm curious. What the heck was that, I don't know, but so some people might say it was an implant. I don't know that. I mean, it could have been, but then I don't know. They say all things, when you put everything together, it kind of makes a profile. Missing time, amnesia over the missing time, strange thing in your knee, different things like that, UFOs, orbs, missing time, so I don't know if they're connected or not. They might be. I can't say because I don't know. But anyway, these are just some more of the things that that I've experienced in life. And it feels good to get them off my chest because I'm not getting any younger. It's good to get them off. And maybe other people who have had some experiences will see that they're not the only ones there. Because I thought, I'm the only one. I'm the big weirdo. But I've learned that there's other people out there. They've had experiences, and we don't have to be afraid to share. We don't have to be afraid to tell each other these things, because the more we tell each other this happened to me and that happened to me, the more other people can say, wow, I'm not alone. When that happened to me, I thought I was the only one. And now come to find out, and you're not schizophrenic when it's not just you. It's not schizophrenic when the voice says something and it happens to come to pass. It is what it is. So I thank Vic Honda for the opportunity to be able to get, a lot of these things off my chest and to share. And hopefully maybe some people will be helped by it. I mean, I'm helped by it. It's therapeutic for me to be able to say it. But I hope other people are helped by it. That would be a big plus if other people are helped by it. So that's pretty much where I should stop now.
If you've had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on the show, please contact us by going to myparax.com. That's myparaex.com. Thanks for listening.